Director Assad Lucas,
Here.
Director Battistelli,
Here.
Director Goldstein,
Here.
Director Marsh-Holshin,
Here.
Director Potter.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as stated.
So moved. Second.
Director Assad Lucas,
Aye.
Director Battistelli,
Aye.
Director Goldstein,
Aye.
Director Marsh-Holshin.
Aye.
All right, rise if you are able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Superintendent update.
Thank you, Lori. I won't make extensive comments at a very high level, but honest level. The preoccupation that I and others have this time of year is around personnel and making really thoughtful decisions at our level about who's going to serve as principals and in various other roles out of this building, and working with our principals to support them and making similar decisions for their staff. Trying to create conditions where we're an attractive place to come through our negotiations process, and we'll be spending more and more time doing that, especially on the certified side in the weeks ahead. And as you know, Lori and Amira are part of our IBS team, and we're set to meet again tomorrow night on a variety of topics, including how might we find ways to reduce the number of teacher absences, staff absences that we have, and the use of temp leave, because we're seeing a lot of increase in subcost and the discontinuity in learning that comes when that happens. So there's a lot of work around personnel, either individual hiring decisions or making working conditions and compensation agreements that can incentivize people to want to work here. And then budget is just the big vehicle that helps all those things happen. And there's a letter that I've drafted today that I'm having some people take a look at that may go out tomorrow to stakeholders in our community that just highlights the big challenge we're in Adams 12. And it's not because of the federal government. There's lots of worry and speculation that the Department of Ed may be dissolved or in whole or in part, and that we might lose funding to support kids who are at risk or kids with disabilities. From all the sources that we've been consulting with, it doesn't seem likely that will happen. Most of them believe the money will still come our way through block grants given from the feds through some other department to states, and then the states in turn will distribute money to us. We hope that is true, but the big challenge we face is at the state level because of the state trying to deal with $1 billion plus budget shortfall, and some leaders, including the governor, proposing that the way we pay for that is through some fairly significant reductions to K-12 funding. So I hope to send something out tomorrow about that, and you'll hear a lot more about the why for my motivation to try to mitigate some of the reductions that the governor's proposed, as Gina talks more about budget here in a little bit on the agenda. That's it for me.
Thank you. All right, Board of Education comments, recognition, awards, and vision. Start with Director Marsh-Holshin.
Okay, well, happy back from break, everyone. I hope they had a good break. I really enjoyed the last week before break was Hundreds Day, and I liked that our social media had all the kids dressed up. My son wore 100 stickers. That was fun. On the 15th, I attended the, we all attended the APAC powwow, which is just an amazing event, and was really great to see. Northland, I went to Northland High School's, the theater kids put on a theater camp for the theater students, because they're high school, put on a camp for the younger kids. And that was a lot of fun, and their upcoming show, Chicago, looks very good, so I may have to go see that. Otherwise, I think that's it.
Thank you. Director Battistelli.
I apologize. I have a big, long list of things. It's my busy time of year. I also attended the APAC, the American Indian Parents Advisory Council, or committee meeting, and it's wonderful. I just need to thank the committee for inviting us to attend and opening up their culture and their heritage to us. It's always an honor to be invited, and it's always wonderful to see our Native students who are graduating and to take part in the ceremony to sort of congratulate them. I also attended the Frozen performance at Glacier Peak Elementary. I think it was their first theater performance in possibly ever. I'm not sure, I don't know. But it was very wonderful and charming to see the kids performing that. And a big shout out to the teachers and staff who helped out, because they literally brought out an entire, one of those big lounge chairs, and their scenery was very hardcore, and I think they probably lost about 20 pounds dragging that stuff on and off the stage. So a big thank you to them. I also attended the Westgate Charter School. I visited with the principal, Sharon Collins, and I got to see a few classrooms and watch the kids learn about a variety of different topics. It was the Kindergarten 100 Days of School event that day too, and it's always very adorable to visit the kindergartners. There was an astounding amount of gray wigs and powdered hair, and a really surprising number of tiny little canes and walkers that I didn't even know they made, but they do. So the kids were really leaning into it and having a lot of fun. And it's funny because kindergartners were drawing pictures of themselves when they were older, but they were all grumpy faces. So the principal and I were talking, like, once you hit 70, you get to be as grumpy as you want to be, so it's okay. So yeah, I really appreciated her opening up that space to me. And I also was able to meet with Sarah Shoemaker, who is an assistant principal at Prospect Ridge Academy, but she was visiting Westgate at the same time. So I was able to hear from both of them. And I got to hear the infamous story about how the teacher, I think, lost a class snake that the principal's son found. So yeah, I felt very much a part of the Adams 12 larger community. The last thing I wanted to mention is I'm glad that our district has so far been shielded from some of the federal actions that are taking place. But I do have an ask from UC Denver. They have a T-Prep program in the School of, I think they call theirs Human Development and Education. And their T-Prep program has graduated 49 teachers who are now teaching in Colorado rural schools. They are currently educating 77 more candidates, serving 57 rural Colorado school districts in partnership with 4 community colleges. And unfortunately, they did lose their federal grant. So if without that funding, they just can't exist anymore. So that pipeline for rural educators, which is desperately needed, has been lost. And what they're doing is, if you know anybody who has benefited from the T-Prep program or has benefited from any sort of similarly funded program, if you could share your story, reach out to, and I have this contact information if anyone reaches out to the Adams 12 district offices, I can get it to them, but wants to share their story in support of the T-Prep program at UC Denver, let me know. But the best way I can kind of depict how serious this is with the teacher shortage is that recently, and this is entirely anecdotal, I was working on a project at my job at CU Boulder in the School of Education, where I was going through a list of teacher contacts, and there were about 6,000 science teachers on that list from the Colorado and surrounding areas. And my job was to just sort of test out how accurate that list still was. It was about 5 years old. And so I went through 250 of the people on that list, and about 1 in every 5 were still at their schools. So that shows you how difficult it is in Colorado from this one small sample to retain teachers and to lose teacher preparation programs on top of it that actively seek out non-traditional folks to fill the role of teachers. The T-Prep program focused a lot on para-educators in rural Colorado. We can kind of get a sense of what a big loss this is and how detrimental it is to Colorado. So, yeah.
Thank you. Director Saad Lucas.
Good evening. As it's been mentioned, we attended the APAC powwow, and it's always, I think this is my third or fourth you're attending, I think third. It's fabulous. I highly recommend it. They do it annually, and I mean, it's just really beautifully put together and done. And so thank you to our APAC leadership for all that you did and all the hard work. And I know Shay Cox said she was there at like 6:30 or 7 a.m. and probably didn't leave until 8 o'clock that night. Yeah, so I also attended the Special Education Advisory Committee meeting on, I think it's the 6th, I think it was the day after our last board meeting, but it was really, the networking part of it was actually a lot of fun. I was able to connect with even a grandparent who attends my kids. Her grandson attends my boys' elementary school, Thorne Elementary, and this is the first time we had met. And yeah, just a lot in common, and we've been able to even connect since then. And so it was really neat. But yeah, great networking. Parents just getting to talk to other parents. They had great breakout sessions depending on the topic, what maybe you needed assistance with or questions for, just more information about. So they usually do those, I think, maybe quarterly. I have to look back, but they send it out district-wide. So if you see it, definitely attend if it's relevant to you. It's very, very informative. As Chris said, we engage in IBS and have another meeting tomorrow night. I think that was, before I kind of talk about what I wanted to talk about, highly recommend registering for the 5-Star 5K. It's the last week in April, yeah. That last Saturday in April. It is super, super fun event. Last year, even with snow, it was a lot of fun. It's just great energy. Walk, run, roll, whatever works. And there's always really great special guests. They're usually athletes that I don't know anything about. Then I get shamed for later because I don't know who they are by my husband. But yeah, it's a really, really fun event. Family involved schools will do rally or relay. So yeah. Do not, and make sure you register sooner than later so you're guaranteed a t-shirt. I have lots of my past t-shirts still. So what I kind of wanted just to briefly touch on is coming out of our work study session. I really appreciate our executives and administrators who attended to hear concerns or just even feedback from us about things that we've heard from other stakeholders in the system, and just their openness to hear, even when it's maybe not easy to listen to or hear, or maybe don't even always agree, and that's okay. And I think that's one thing I really, really respect about Adams 12 is we're willing to have conversations that maybe we don't want to have, but we need to have. And we walk into it and embrace it. And so, yeah, it feels really great to be a part of a system and a team like that. That, the common thing that we all have is kids and wanting to do better by kids and support kids in all the ways that they need. So I really appreciate that, especially with just some of the chaos that's occurring, is that we can be grounded in that sense, with at federal, state, wherever, but we can be, what we have control over is making sure we continue moving forward for kids and doing what's best. So thank you, everyone who attended. Thank you to everyone in the system. We wouldn't be able to function without everyone part of the system, so.
Thank you. So the last time we met, we had just gotten off a plane and run here to a board meeting, and then the next day I ran to the Capitol. where I got some conversations with some of our electeds about some of the concerns that we have about school funding and what's coming down the pipe. And then I've been visiting a few schools too. I went to Rocky Top, and Lashana, the principal there, took me around and got to see some old friends and meet some new ones and watch what's going on over there. And I was very pleased to see. You can always kind of tell kind of just the flavor of the school when you go into it. And then I went into an 8th grade science teacher's classroom, and she said to the kids, "Do you know who this is?" And some of them actually said, "Oh, that's your mom." And so they, she gave them a little bit moment to, ask me questions about what I do and everything, and that was really cool. I did go to the powwow too, and that was really an amazing event. I got there at 10 o'clock when they said it started, but culturally I should have known better because they don't get going right away. So I got to watch the whole thing kind of wake up and get going, and then you guys all showed up, and we got to, we were honored, and I guess I left a little too early. We were there till like afternoon, I believe. The principal, Kate Claver, texted me. She goes, "Are you still here? You won a prize." And so I didn't ask if I had to be present to win, but it was nice that they thought about that. And then I went, we had our break, and I just the other day, Monday, I guess it was, I went to Century Middle School, and because I just have random, I set up visits, or Stephanie gets me on the calendar with the principals, and I don't go with any agenda. I just say, "Oh, what do you want me to see?" Well, I showed up perfect timing at Century because apparently some students had written a grant and had gotten it to have a program. And of all the programs that they had to choose from, they chose a program called A Seat at the Table, and it was about Martin Luther King Jr. And they got to do 2 assemblies, and one for the 8th graders and parents were invited, and then one for the 6th and 7th graders, and I was there for the one with the 6th and 7th graders. And it was a little bit of talking, a little bit of audio-visual, a little bit of music, jazz music, and they related it to, the civil rights era and what it all meant. And they basically went through the early beginnings of the civil rights movement, and they culminated with Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, and it was really cool. They had us up dancing and snapping our fingers, and the kids were great. They were into it too, and it was all about, and the principal was you could tell she has connections with a boatload of those kids. And, how she and I talked a little bit, and she said, it's so important how we have connections with our kids, and they do. I mean, afterwards, after the assembly, there were pockets of kids talking to staff all over the area between the gym and the cafeteria, and it was really, really special. And then I did the IBS with Amira, and I think that pretty much sums up my busyness. The CASB Winter Conference is tomorrow and Friday. Is anybody else going? I'll represent. And I think it involves going back down to the Dome, and then also just talking with board members from other places. So on that note, I will go on to board committee liaison reports. What did I skip? Oh, public comment. I'm sorry. Okay, next on the agenda. General public comment. Do we have any?
I didn't want you to skip it, though.
Oh, I know I can't skip it. Okay, all right, sorry. Okay, now I will go on to board committee liaison reports. Do we have a DAC report?
We do. And because it's been one of those months, I had to sit there and remember what I was doing 3 weeks ago for about an hour, and then I was like, oh, yeah. And how could I have forgotten, because Gina Lanier showed up at that one, and she did a wonderful job presenting to the DAC on school finance and the Adams 12 budget and all the great things she and Aaron do to keep us above ground, keep our nose clean and all that good stuff. So she did a pretty darn good job trying to explain school finance in Colorado in 45 minutes. I think that deserves an award, actually. We received lots of great questions from people on the DAC committee about how it works, and a lot of it sort of, people are very intrigued by the whole mill levy situation. After that, there's a survey, the survey that they've been sort of tinkering with and working on that Bo has been helping out with. The participants tested it out and they offered feedback on that survey. So I think the next step is to make those changes based on that feedback and get it out to principals to send to the SACs.
Thank you. LRPAC, we met on February 13th, and I have the minutes right here. So our vice chair had to resign. The vice chair of the LRPAC had to resign because that would be a conflict of interest, because he actually is now part of this whole process of spending the bond. So that they are taking interest. If you're interested in being the vice chair, you can fill out a form. We also talked about the North Stadium bond project because they need an HVAC replacement. And then we started talking about the Thornton High project. The design will kick off in March, and we have picked a contractor.
So the architect's all the way a done deal, and I think I may have in my inbox a recommendation for the contractor side that we'll be acting on very soon.
Good, yeah. And then we talked about some land acquisition around that. And we also talked about some of the positions that are being hired for the bond hiring. And talked about the summer projects that are coming up. And then sadly at the end, we talked about, or we said goodbye to Tim Dozel as he goes on his next journey, and thanked him for his work with us. So that's that in a nutshell. Okay. Then, fiscal year 26 budget assumption update. Gina and Aaron, would you like to give us an update?
Good evening, board. Ooh, that's loud. Sorry. Good evening, board. I know you've heard a lot about the concerns we have with the budget. Some of these slides you've seen before, we won't go over in detail. Others, myself and Chris will likely add some commentary along the way. And please stop me with any questions. So we'll look briefly at the impact of funded pupil count, a slide you have seen before. We'll talk a little bit about what the legislature may or may not do, and look at some of our budget assumptions for fiscal year 25-26. I appreciate you guys letting us come tonight to talk about this. We thought it was really important as we start preparing for rolling out the school-based budgets that we come talk to you first. So on paper, our goal is to get the budgets to schools. I think it's March 14th, that last Friday, the second week of March, with the hope that the schools can turn that around by before they go on spring break. We may delay that based on what we're hearing from the state, but that is our on-paper goal right now. I think you all are very aware of why averaging is so important to Colorado school districts. We really rely on those funds to help provide stability when we're preparing our budgets. And so we, as you know, adopt the budget in June. We don't know our funded pupil count until December, and we're halfway through the school year then. So to make a big pivot without the benefit of that averaging would be incredibly difficult. And as Chris has talked about countless times, when we're declining enrollment, we're not declining in neat little class size buckets. We're not losing 30 fifth graders at one school. Those students are spread out across the district and across grade spans. So it's not as simple as, well, you have 30 less students, you need one less teacher. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. This is a slide you've seen before. So the bars are our October count, the number of students from October count. The yellow line, the one on top, is, if you look at the far right side, those numbers, that's the number of students we're benefiting from for averaging. So in 2019-20, I believe that amount was roughly 129 students. And then when we look at 24-25, our benefit of averaging is close to that 1250. You can see that as our enrollment starts to, we're still declining, but as we start stabilizing, the gap between the number of students we're funded for and our actual count gets closer. I'm not going to go through any of this with you guys. I just am really liking to keep it so that the board and others are aware of the continual budgeting that the district is doing throughout the year. Every month we do something around budget. Every day I do something around budget, actually. All right. So first, at the January board meeting, I announced that the inflationary number was released. That was 2.3%, which is really pretty small compared to what we've seen in the last few years. That will increase the base for all school districts throughout Colorado by 2.3%, and so it will grow from 8,691.8 minus 195.42. Every school district receives the same base. The next piece we have that's a challenge is, as you've heard us talk about, even without a change to averaging in the formula, that declining enrollment piece is going to impact the district's ability to have stable revenue. We are looking at, in our current budget modeling, a decline of 0.83% funded students. Depending on what happens with averaging, we could see a reduction of funded pupil count year over year of as little as 585 students or up to 1,654 students. If we go to three-year averaging, our funded pupil count year over year will be down 1,300 students. So you multiply that by, let's pretend, $12,000. It's a very big number year over year. The other piece that's impacting our funding is we're estimating a decline in our at-risk students of just about 6.5 percentage points. And the reason for that is in this year, we had roughly that number of students who were no longer Medicaid eligible and at risk for direct certification purposes. The way that the state uses at risk for funding allowed us to carry forward for 1 year only those students who were no longer Medicaid eligible. There is absolutely a chance that those students will become at risk again. From a budget perspective, we're being conservative that they won't, because we're funded roughly $1,100 per at-risk student. And so if we inflate that number too high, I could come to you in a few months and say, we were really wrong. So I would rather err on the side of caution. Okay, the next piece, we have calculated for just holding place what would a compensation increase of 2.5% look like. And so our calculation is roughly $10 million. That doesn't mean anything has been agreed upon. That's just a placeholder we've put out there to share what that looks like from a budget perspective. The next piece, we know that we have to increase the substitute teacher budget for next year by $1.7 million. The current budget is a little over $6 million, and it's forecasting to be well overspent this year and resulting in us needing to increase that for next year. The next piece we've got to solve for is last year during the budget, or this year, next year's already this year for me, sorry. This year, when we were putting together the budget, we planned to spend $9.9 million with one-time funds. And so going into this budget process, we need to identify what we're going to do with those $9.9 million because they were funded with one-time money. And then the district is experiencing ongoing inflationary pressures, I'm sure similar to what households are seeing. And I'm looking to Chris to see if he has anything he wants to add.
I'll just say, one of the big inflationary pressures is probably the biggest hike in health insurance premiums that we've seen in the last 15 years around here. It's likely it'll be 10% plus. We've been pretty fortunate for a long time to be in the 3 to 6% range. So that's probably $2 million in itself. We spend about $20 million right now to pay 95% of the cost of employee-only health insurance costs. So that's a big hike. And then there are things like custodial supplies and materials, cleaning supplies that have gone up really significantly. And then finally, there are some things that are going to go up, and we're trying to tease out, do we need to allocate more money, or can we do it within our existing allocations? And a really good example of that are utilities. We expect there will be rate increases for water, electricity, and gas, perhaps for fuel, but we're also doing a close look to see if we can pay for those increases within our existing budget allocations if we've not been spending all the money in past years for those purposes.
All right, so the next thing that we're waiting for as a district as we look at this to the state is the economic forecast that will come out on March 17th. Through that, we'll have some better understanding of inflationary and revenue pressures for next year. And I'm optimistically hoping that we know the fate of 1448. We are aware that one of the triggers that should pause 1448 has been met based on an accounting change that the state needed to do. Really, that it was a technicality, not a change in revenue, and so we're not sure where that will land. But I'm optimistically hoping that we'll know more through that forecast. The legislative session ends on May 7th. We have real concern that we will not know school finance funding until late April or even early May. And so that creates just an incredible challenge for the district in making decisions. Okay, so I had to model a few scenarios because I have absolutely no idea where this is going to land. So what you're looking at here, the first column, we're showing the current total program for the district, excluding the Charter School Institute schools within our boundaries. You can see that our current year revenue is about $390.5 million. Our funded pupil count was 34,082. If we were funded on the School Finance Act of 1994 with no changes to it, straight 5-year averaging, the 2.3% inflation, our funding year over year would go up $21,703. If we're funded on House Bill 1448 as written, no changes, our revenue would go up $3.3 million. If we're funded through the School Finance Act of 94, but with 3-year averaging, our revenue goes down $7.7 million. And if we're funded on 1448 with 3-year averaging, all of those House Bill 1448s are assuming the 6-year phase-in, not the governor's 7-year phase-in, which would 7 years reduces our revenue more. We would see a reduction in year-over-year revenue of $3.5 million.
So I have a question. So when you say with the House Bill 1448, does that mean that the trigger's going into effect?
If the triggers go into effect, 1448 is paused, and we are supposed to be funded on the School Finance Act of 94.
So do we want 1448 not to be paused?
It's complicated. So the reason it's complicated, I'm just going to give my opinion, is the state clearly cannot afford to fund 1448. And so if we're funded on 1448, the proposals are to get rid of averaging. And I do not show that modeling to get rid of averaging. My recollection, and he remembers every number I tell him, and so he does, which is good. My recollection is if with 1448 without averaging, it's maybe a 8 to 9 million reduction year over year. Does that sound right? I'd have to look it up.
That sounds familiar, but don't quote me on that one.
And I can look it up. Actually, I sent an email with it today, so I should know, but I have run so many scenarios, I can't keep track of the numbers without looking. So because the state cannot afford 1448, we will be much worse off until the state has revenue to actually fund it. So for me, we're better off with the 1994. If fully funded, we're better off with 1448. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Chris.
I'll just say there are so many other scenarios that you could stretch along this slide. One of the scenarios that's not modeled there is if enrollment averaging goes away completely. And we've talked to you a lot about if that happens, that portion of change takes us backwards $13.2 million. So that's a significant one. We're fighting our best fight to not let that happen. But if it did, that's the worst case scenario. In a perfect world, it would be nice to have 1448 and stick with 4-year averaging, which is what they sold us a year ago. I don't know that it's going to advance all the equity interests that they claimed that it would a year ago, and that's part of the reason why we fought against it. But 1448 with 4-year averaging, which is what they told us a year ago, I think would be the best case. Fiscally, it just doesn't feel like there's any plausibility to that happening.
Exactly. Okay, so I'm going to try to talk upbeat as I go through this slide. Here is one of the possibilities that we may be facing. So I'm showing if our school finance revenue is down $3.5 million year over year. And then here's a list of expenditures, money out, that could happen. So I've shown the 2.5% compensation placeholder, the one-time funded. What I didn't mention in an earlier slide is our allocation to charter schools we're projecting will go up about $2.5 million. And the reason for that is they're not declining enrollment. So their student count is staying relatively stable, and their share on a per pupil basis for mill levy override will go up as our number goes down. Then we have a placeholder for health insurance. If the increase is 10%, it could cost roughly $2 million, and then the substitute teacher budget. So our total expenditures to solve for is around $26.1 million, leaving a funding gap of nearly $30 million. This list, as you can see, does not include any other inflationary pressure items that will put pressure on the district for this year. So key takeaways. Regardless of what happens, our revenue is declining because of our reduced pupil count. That is the bottom line. Regardless of what happens, our revenue is going down. You all are very well aware of the uncertainty we have with school funding. So as we learn more, we will continue to adjust the numbers, and we will communicate out what we learn. For me, the best case scenario is the School Finance Act of 94. The most realistic best case scenario is the School Finance Act of 1994 with either a minimal budget stabilization factor or planned spending out of the education fund. But basically, we are bracing ourselves for a funding gap and moving forward with those assumptions.
This may be more of a Chris question, but how is the state looking at the per pupil? Are they two tracks that they're looking at, the 1448 and the per pupil, or are they tied together? Are they gonna have to go together? Can they ditch one? I don't know if that makes sense.
So I'll take the first crack at it, and then Gina can help me out if I misspeak here. I would say the fundamental changes between what we have now with the School Finance Act of 1994 and 1448, that's always been contemplated to go into effect next year. The big changes are, number one, the new School Finance Act gives a lot more money to small rural districts. Throughout almost my entire tenure in this role, small rurals, because they don't have big economies of scale, are asking the legislature every year for $30 to $60 to $100 million more to support them. Lots of those places are paying teachers $35,000 a year. They're just struggling to keep their doors open. They're fairly consistently declining in enrollment. And so part of what 1448 is designed to do is to better fund small rural districts. A second thing that it did, and I think this was a big push from the governor, is change this declining enrollment averaging mechanism from a 5-year time frame to 4 years. The governor's had longstanding belief that that money's not necessary. We keep trying to make the persuasive case that, yes, we do need that, because you might lose a few kids in a grade level year over year over year, and it can take you 6 or 7 years before you can reduce a teacher. But it reduces averaging from 5 years to 4 years, so it saves the state some money there. A third big thing that it does is give more money to students who are identified as a student with a disability, a multilingual learner student, or students defined as at-risk, which is usually a student who's qualifying for free or reduced lunch. And the special education funding increase is probably the most significant of those three pieces, because it keeps what's been in place for the last 30-plus years in terms of what we call categorical funding for special ed. That's a pot of money that the legislature allocates for special needs pupils that then gets allocated, distributed throughout the state. It keeps that and then adds into the formula an allocation for kids who are identified with a disability. So those are the weights that it has. It also, what I think is completely contrary to the message about advancing equity, it allows school districts to supersize their override revenues even bigger, in some cases up to 30% in terms of the basic override. So we now have a number of school districts that are permitted to get up to half of what they're getting under the State School Finance Act as additional money from their community. And that's fairly easy to do in places that have a big property tax base like Denver and Boulder, and it's pretty darn hard to do in places that don't, like 27J and Adams 12. So those are the highlight pieces for most districts. And I can't remember where all the hold harmless deals landed, because there's lots of deal making that went on last year to get some places like Douglas County and Littleton and Jeffco to move from an opposed position to at least a monitor or neutral position. There were some deals made that I think mitigated some of the districts going back and losing funding as much as first proposed. I don't know exactly where that landed. Gina may have more info on that.
There was a hold harmless provision put in, and the governor has removed that from his budget proposals. So getting a lot of ire from those districts who made a deal to support it. Yeah.
I'll just add a few things that I don't know that we said in the presentation. We're certainly, number one, not alone in the space of declining enrollment. Out of 178 school districts in the state, I believe we're seeing in recent reports that 138 of them are declining in enrollment. Number two, there's an article published in the Sun today that I'll get on to all of you, but it quotes a school district, I can't remember the name of that district off the top of my head, that if enrollment averaging goes away, I think they take a 45 to 50% cut in terms of revenue.
Was out east.
So it's a smaller rural district. You know, the kinds of things we're talking about here are probably, you know, just a small fraction of that. So there are lots of people who are going to get whacked much more than we would if this goes forward. But then number three, I would just emphasize it doesn't need to be that way. Our state education fund, which is a savings account to support K-12, has over $1 billion in it. And I believe this is one of those critical times to draw from that to mitigate the harms that the governor's proposal will cause in terms of programming reductions and class size increases and things of that sort. So I do think there's a better way, whether we can break through and persuade him and legislative leaders to go a different direction. That's the big TBD. But we're going to let our community know about those possibilities and hope that we can turn them around.
Any other questions? Thank you, Gina.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. All right, next on the agenda, North Glen High School ADA upgrade. I will entertain a motion to approve RFP 25-017, upgrades for compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act at North Glen High School as presented. So moved.
Second?
All right, thank you. Molly.
I'll do a
welcome.
quick intro and then pass a baton to Molly and perhaps Margie. I'll say, as background, there was some debate among staff about, is this an item that we need to bring to the board? What your policies currently provide is that if there are acquisitions or dispositions of property that are proposed or planned by staff, that if it's in excess of $500,000 and that acquisition's not part of a approved bond plan from our voters or a mill levy override plan approved by our voters or part of the annual budget that you adopt in June, that we come forward and ask for your approval for those items or for you to disapprove those items. And in this case, it's there's debate among staff about whether making property improvements and correcting ADA deficiencies, whether that constitutes an acquisition or disposition of property, in this case, an acquisition of property. I think moving forward, it'll be helpful to add some clarity to the policy so that we're meeting your expectations. I ask that we bring it forward and talk to Lori briefly about this. Because I think on our end, one of the key interests that we hear the board articulate and that we hold as staff is transparency. We know with policy governance, there's a lot of authority delegated to me and our leadership team to make financial decisions. And yet, we feel like there's some guardrails that are important to have, and when you're making a significant new expenditure that wasn't otherwise planned, we believe it's important to bring it forward and let you know and get your thumbs up or thumbs down on it. So that's some background, some why, and after tonight, I think we should revisit this policy language and just get more clarity about what things should we bring forward that are mid-year changes and at what dollar amount. With that, Ms. Molly.
All right, thank you very much. So North Glen High School, as you remember, just a little background before I go into the what. As we looked at I'll just say the background around the ADA compliance issues were recognized in 2022. If you remember from there to now, we planned a bond, and North Glen High School is one of the potential schools we looked into rebuilding. So it looks as if we knew of this in 2022 and we're bringing it to you in 25. That's because we had an agreement that if North Glen High School was not selected for rebuild, we would go ahead and then unpause and complete so that we could be fiscally responsible. So that is what the background is. Let me explain the what. So this is through the Office of Civil Rights Monitoring Plan that we have completed in May of 22 through the Colorado Community College System, and that's the agency that is responsible for a CTE in the state and the funding that correlates to that. There are federal regulations kind of behind the scenes that the CCCS investigate, and they visited North Glen High School and found accessibility deficiencies. So we are in need of completing those. We have it planned for this summer if this is approved. And And those include things like the west student parking lot, some south administrative visitor parking areas, our toilet rooms on the second floor, our health clinic accessible toilet room, our theater dressing accessible room, locker rooms, the little theater guardrails and drinking fountains, and then some UL assembly details. So that is the detail that will be in this project. It has been bid and is compliance with District Policy 3320, which is our procurement competition requirements. We have the total project expenditure is $834,800. The funding source for this is cap reserve through our ADA reserves. Our ADA reserve current balance is $874,753. So if this were to be approved, our balance in the ADA reserve project category will be just about $40,000. But the overall total balance of capital reserve following this project, if approved, would be $24.26 million. I will also just share that if we do not complete this project, we do believe there will be a potential for either funding loss and or at a minimum ineligible to apply for other parking grants that CTE programs often are funded through. In addition, we would have continued accessibility deficiencies for all of our students at Northglenn High School.
Comments or questions?
I was glad to see that this is being brought back up, because from the legal standpoint, I think it's just really important. It's also important from a community standpoint that our students feel welcome, fully welcome in this space. My father, he has been in a wheelchair since I was 5 years old, and so the experience of a person with a physical handicap is something I'm very familiar with, and it can feel really alienating to not be fully welcomed and embraced into certain spaces. And yeah, I think it's great that we're doing this now. I don't think this is a should we. I think this is a we have to, for the legal reasons, for the compliance reasons, for the students feeling welcomed, family members feeling welcomed and embraced.
Thank you for sharing that.
Director Assad Lucas,
Aye.
Director Battistelli,
Aye.
Director Goldstein,
Aye.
Director Marsh-Holshin.
Aye.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Molly. Next, proposed resolution, equitable funding of Colorado public education. I'm going to, I guess I can make the motion. Okay, I'm going to make a motion, or ask for a motion to adopt the resolution supporting adequacy in Colorado public education funding as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All right, so sometimes these resolutions kind of need to be quick because they're immediate and relevant today, tomorrow, and maybe not 2 weeks from now. Yesterday, years ago. This one, so, you know, I have the advantage of being part of a network of school board members, being on the CASB board, and we talk to each other, and, you know, you guys have seen, our resolutions that we as an organization act on behalf of all school boards and all students. And so sometimes we, rather than, we form coalitions, I guess, if you will, to send messages of how we feel about what's going on at the state level, sometimes the federal level. And the adequacy studies that, we've talked about a little bit is, there were 2 of them done. They were mandated by legislation, and they showed that we underfund public education in the state. One said $3.4 billion, the other one said almost $4 billion, or over $4 billion. And so that's a big number when you look at the whole big picture of how much money does go into public education. And so this is an opportunity for us to be a collective voice as we send a message to the Gold Dome of how we really feel. So, comments, questions?
No, I mean, I agree. I think this is one of those things that is well overdue and is really dire, especially with current financial uncertainty in our state. And, you know, I mean, even just reading through this and hearing it, when it's, like, I mean, our educators, there's such a discrepancy between teachers and then people with similar education and educational experience or professional experience and pay. And it's just, I mean, these are people who are educating our kids and are with our kids 8 hours a day and you know, propelling them for the future. At risk should be a third higher for at-risk students. Like, I think it's just, I think what's so frustrating for me is this is not a big surprise. It just, I think there's many people who feel this way, and so hopefully, now that it's official and, you know, it's been assessed and these reports have come out, that it's harder for people to avoid these conversations. So this is really crucial for our kids and public education.
Like Amira, I was glad to see this resolution. The thing I always get stuck in, and the number might seem surprising to some who aren't familiar with the state of school finance in Colorado compared to other states. It makes a lot of sense when we also learned other things, like I believe last time I read, Colorado was 46th in the nation for school funding. So yeah, the $3.2 billion deficit in one study and the $4.1 billion deficit in the other study makes a lot of sense. The other thing I would say is that this is a concern, and I'm glad that Adams 12 is taking this proactive approach and pushing back with other districts, is I'm not entirely like Chris and Phil might have this clause memorized, but I'm pretty sure the state constitution says that we're supposed to provide an adequate education, right?
Thorough and uniform.
Thorough and uniform. So is it thorough if we have a $4.1 billion deficit or a $3.2 billion deficit? And the other piece is when the mill levy override and the bond were on the, when we were working on that, I believe you shared a statistic, Chris, Superintendent Godowski. The formality is difficult for me sometimes.
I answer to both.
You shared a statistic about the dollar amount of investment and how it correlates to an increase in student success rates. And I think about our concerns statewide around students' performance and proficiency, and I think about how much more we might see and might be able to invest in our students' success if we had adequate funding. So I can't remember what that source was, but if you have it handy somewhere, I'd love to see it again.
I'll dig that out.
I would just say thank you for putting this together, and thank you, Lori, and for everyone that goes down and testifies. In my work, I'm meeting a lot of lawmakers and lobbyists, and I think for us constantly, like, it's a known how inadequate it is and how inequitable it is, especially if you're in a county like Broomfield, where you cross Sheridan and schools are funded very different for BVSD than they are for Adams 12. And that's not known. So I feel like I just want to make it a statement that I appreciate this, because I'm sure it feels like yelling into the void, or that everyone knows it and you're beating a dead horse. But I really think continuing to have this conversation is incredibly important. So thanks.
And I just want to point out too, when Gina showed us the budget, she gave us a number of $390 million. And when you look at the resolution says that according to this adequacy study, we are underfunded, what is it, 210 to 270 million? I mean, it's not quite half, or it's not quite double the need, that we need, but it's close. And, but yet, we're having to have a $1 billion refund to our taxpayers. Just want to put that on the record. Anybody else? Anything else?
Director Assad Lucas,
Aye.
Director Battistelli,
Aye.
Director Goldstein,
Aye.
Director Marshall.
Aye.
I want to thank everybody for their advocacy of what's best for our children. Next, proposed proclamation, Women's History Month. I will entertain a motion to adopt the proclamation declaring March Women's History Month in Adams 12 5-star schools as presented.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? Women?
Yay, ladies.
All I have to say is I highly recommend the book. I think they've had multiple versions now of it, but Goodnight Stories of Rebel Girl, or for Rebel Girls. It's just a collection of stories of famous women who made history and changed the course of history and what we know now, and contributed in significant ways. And it's just a great fun read, but it's a good book for Women's History Month.
What's that quote? History was not made by women who behaved, or something like that? Yeah.
And all big decisions.
Just think if we ruled the world,
I know.
We're digressing here tonight. All right,
All
call the
right.
vote.
Director Assad Lucas,
Aye.
Director Battistelli,
Aye.
Director Goldstein,
Aye.
Director Marshall.
Aye.
Okay, good. All right, on to minutes. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting minutes and work study session of February 5th, 2025, and the special board meeting of February 10th, 2025, as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, call the vote.
Director Assad Lucas,
Aye.
Director Battistelli,
Aye.
Director Goldstein,
Aye.
Director Marshall.
Aye.
On to monitoring report. Gina's making her way over there. Don't go too fast because it's going to take me a while to read this. I will entertain a motion to acknowledge that the board has received a monitoring report as of February 26, 2025 for the period July 1st, 2024 through December 31st, 2024 of the superintendent concerning operating limitations policy 2.4, financial condition and activities, and finds the superintendent's interpretations are reasonable and supported by data that is relevant, justified, and complete.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, hi Gina.
Excuse me, did that motion, what was the date of that first motion? Received a monitoring report as of,
February 26, 2025.
that's what it says in there? Okay, that's not the one that I printed off earlier this week.
Oh, that's today, right?
That is correct.
And it is
It is
today.
correct now, thank you.
Okay. So we're back this quarter reporting on the monitoring report 2.4 as of December 31st, 2024. So the second quarter of the year. And I'm happy to report that we have compliance across each of the categories. So one of the first areas we look at is monitoring the fund balance and reserves. And so the district and our charter schools are adequately, correctly reporting for TABOR and other fund balance components. This slide shows what we're forecasting as of the end of the fiscal year, the final bar graph of our unassigned fund balance. So we are looking at a fund balance unassigned of $18.2 million, which is in compliance. The board policy is not less than 4% and not more than, I think 8%, 6%, 8%, yeah. I don't have that written down. We also look at the district's cash position, investment, and liquidity on page 6 of the report. As of 12/31, the revenue in our governmental funds, all of our governmental funds, exceeds our expenditures by $61.9 million. So we're reporting good liquidity there. And then another way to look at it in the monitoring report is having our liquidity above our monthly expenditures. So you can see the smaller portion is our restricted reserves. We can't use those funds for other things. Those are restricted cash and restricted reserves. The purple portion is our unrestricted cash. And then that green line is our average monthly operating expenditures. And the reason we're seeing much better liquidity than I would normally report, through December we'd be pretty okay, but next quarter we would see a big drop off, is the change we've told you about the state made and how we're being funded on the state's share of our school total program funding. And so just as a reminder, in prior years we were funded in roughly equal installments over 12 months, and now we're being funded those in 9 months, because then the remaining months will receive our property tax revenue from the county. So that has had a really great impact on the district's liquidity and also our investment earnings. I changed, my pages got out of order, sorry. Okay, so the other things we look at is, are we paying our bills on time? Are we collecting receivables in a timely manner? And we are reporting compliance there, no late fees, which is fantastic. And then we look at monitoring our bond compliance and tracking of mill levy overrides. I had really good notes that I wrote down. Okay, so I'm going to go from my memory because I clearly didn't bring that page with me, but we break out, we walk through the mill levy override 5C spending and other mills throughout the report, and I encourage you to take a few minutes to read that if you haven't read the whole report already. It's really good information. And then on the bond portion, we keep track of the bond funds. We don't commingle those funds, those proceeds, with our general funds or other. So for the last bond issuance, 2016, all of those were spent as of June 30th, so we don't have anything to report because as of December 31st, we had not yet issued the new bond. And so I expect when I come back to you with the report as of March 31st that we'll have something more to share regarding the bond. All right, and so the next piece that's monitored is the audit compliance. And so first, the auditors, Clifton Larson Allen, came and reported to you regarding our annual audit last December. And the next piece that I want to highlight is that we have 1 year left in our contract with Clifton Larson Allen before we need to go out for an RFP. So our plan is to go out for RFP late fall, early December. We don't want to do it too close to the timing of the actual audit, but in plenty of time in the event that the district chooses to go with a new audit firm. GFOA recommends not to change auditors more often than every 5 years. And so we typically do a contract for 5 years, or 1 year with 5 renewals. So that's where we're at with that piece. And then a quick highlight on the quarterly financials. So those were included in board docs for you. These financials are, again, as of December 31st. And a friendly reminder, when you're looking at the budget to actual, that budget is the June adopted budget and not the January amended budget, because this is as of December. To get a closer highlight of what the January amended budget looks like, we have that reflected mostly in the forecasted column. There may be some updates for items that we see trending a little different than we planned when we put together the budget in December for the January meeting, but that really closely aligns to the amended budget. And from a highlight standpoint in the financials, the general fund revenue is trending higher than last year, and again, that's because of the change primarily to the change the state made with funding our state share. And our expenditures are trending slightly higher to adopted budget, and by slightly I mean 1.3%, and so not significant. And those are the big highlights I have. Any questions?
Lori, could I make a quick comment? So the gist of this report is all about quarterly financial statements. Where do we stand mid-year? I'm glad that we're in compliance. There was some discussion that Gina just engaged in about independent audit. And I've emailed you recently, but I just want to say it in a more public setting that as I looked at a CDE report reflecting on all the audits they received for school districts throughout the state, I didn't read the entire list. But as I went fairly deep through looking at big districts in the metro, and I think I got through Douglas County, we were the only one of those big districts that did not have an audit finding, either in terms of our basic set of financials or the federal program that they audit intensely on a rotating basis. And so it says a lot about the exceptional competence that we have in Gina, Aaron, and team. And I just want to publicly thank you for doing an outstanding job.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And Aaron really does work incredibly hard to limit those type of findings. As we shared during one of the presentations that we made regarding audit, there will be years we have findings. It happens, and many of the findings tend to not even be financial related. And so, but I really appreciate those kind words.
Yes, thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Gina. Thank you both. Thank you both. How many years has Clifton Allen Larson done our audits?
You know, that's in the monitoring report, and it's many years.
I think it's 2021.
Oh, well, no,
it's longer than
they've
that.
been doing the audits for, I would guesstimate, 20-ish years. And there's only a few audit firms that will bid when we go out to the market. And so it's hard to change auditors. So something the district did the last time we went out for RFP is we required the audit firm to change partners. And they did that.
I know when I sat on the FAC a few years ago, that question came out, I think it was around 15, 16 years even then at that. And so that's been like, 3-ish years. So yeah, it's been a long time that they've been on there, so good partnership.
Yeah, I'm going from memory, but the last time I looked, I think there were only maybe 3 or 4 audit firms that will take on a district our size.
Nice. Okay.
Director Assad Lucas,
Aye.
Director Battistelli,
Aye.
Director Goldstein,
Aye.
Director Marsh-Holshin.
Aye.
All right. Prospect Ridge Academy Kindergarten Readiness Assessment Waiver Request. I will entertain a motion to grant the request from Prospect Ridge Academy to pursue a waiver to Colorado Revised Statute 22-7-10142A and allow the use of the waiver, if granted by the state, to be in effect through the duration of PRA's current contract with the district, which expires on June 30th, 2029.
Is that to be considered as part of the overall consent agenda?
Oh, you're right. Yes, it is, but then there's no motion for the consent agenda. Or did I not see it?
So Phil, would you be opposed, given that there's not a more broad-based consent agenda motion to do each one individually, the personnel report and the PRA piece.
There's only two, so yes, you may proceed in that fashion.
Okay,
That's probably the easiest path forward at this point.
Okay.
all right. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay. Call the vote.
Director Assad Lucas.
Aye.
Director Battistelli.
Aye.
Director Goldstein.
Aye.
Director Marsh-Holshin.
Aye.
Okay, personnel actions. I will entertain a motion to approve the personnel actions as listed, resignations and terminations, transfers and reassignments, employment and leaves of absence.
So moved.
Second.
Call the vote.
Director Assad Lucas.
Aye.
Director Battistelli.
Aye.
Director Goldstein.
Aye.
Director Marsh-Holshin.
Aye.
There. Calendar. Next Wednesday, we have our community engagement board meeting at North Glen High. Sounds like we came up with having, our usual session with students before. And what time will that, 6? Six students. At what time? Six, okay, good. And, yeah, because I looked at my calendar. And then, I think we're just going to do some updates then for our meeting, because when we met, we couldn't really come up with anything that was relevant, and we don't want to meet for the sake of me, so we'll use that time for updates.
Yeah, two items that you could add for next time. One is I really encourage us to have a discussion about that policy that I was referring to on the Northland High School ADA project, and what are the board's expectations for unplanned, unbudgeted expenditures during the course of the year? When should we bring those forward? So I think that would be a worthwhile discussion. And then the second possibility is an hour probably wasn't enough for some of the discussion that maybe you wanted to have or would like to continue around things like student conduct, behavior, professional learning, and the rest. So if there's pieces of that dialogue that we started but didn't finish or that you'd like to explore further, that could be a good time to bring some people. We might not bring the whole group that was here earlier tonight, but we could bring a small group of them to continue that discussion if that's helpful.
And we will be meeting at North Glen High in the STEM room there. All right, then we have our March meetings and our April meeting. Our regular schedule's a little off kilter because of spring break, so we'll meet the second and third Wednesdays. And I already signed up for the 5-Star 5K. And I get a shirt. Then my son is signed up, although he doesn't know that yet. Any questions, comments, or anything before we adjourn?
My kids usually find out the morning of as well.
Yeah, but he had fun last year with your husband and his friends, so. And he has been running a lot more too, so hopefully he will have a good day. Okay, we're adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.